I have been sitting in this chair for 3 days, not because I am sick, not because I cannot walk, but because I have something stuck inside me that needs to come out before I run out of time to say it. My name is Walter Calloway. I am 89 years old, and there is one Tuesday, just one single Tuesday in October 65 years ago, that I have never been able to forget. I was 24 years old. I had a letter in my coat pocket, a letter I wrote for a girl named June. I never gave it to her, and because I never gave her that letter, she married somebody else. That letter stayed folded in my wallet for 65 years. The paper got so old and thin I could barely read the words anymore. That is the whole story, but the why I never gave it, that is what I need to say out loud. Before I cannot say it anymore. I do not have much time left. The doctors do not say it so simply, but when you are 89, you learn how to read a room. My daughter thinks I am in here making a memory recording. That is what I told her. But really, I am just finally being honest, not to teach anyone anything, not to sound wise, just because carrying something heavy for 65 years gets very, very tiring, and I am tired. Her name was June Arata. Her family had moved to our small town in Ohio after the war. Her father ran a little watch repair shop on Clement Street. I used to find broken old watches at yard sales, watches I did not need, just so I had a reason to walk into that shop, just so I could hope she would walk through the back door. She always did. She had this habit of tucking her hair behind one ear when she was reading something, or thinking hard. And every time she looked up and saw me standing there was this tiny moment, just half a second, where her face went soft. Then she would compose herself and say, "Walter, another broken watch." And I would say, "Afraid so." We were both lying about so many things. If you have ever liked someone and said nothing, if you have ever let a moment pass because you were too scared, you already know where this story is going. Stay with me. I have waited 65 years to say this out loud. And if this story already feels familiar to you, go ahead and hit the like button. It helps more people find stories like this one. I grew up in a family where nobody said "I love you," not because they did not feel it. I know now they felt it very deeply. But in our house, saying feelings out loud felt dangerous, like leaving the front door wide open at night. So I grew up thinking that feelings were something you kept locked inside. You took care of them quietly. You did not let them show. June was the first person who made me see how much that had cost me. We were never officially boyfriend and girlfriend. That was not something anyone had agreed to. And in a small Ohio town in 1963, a white boy from a Baptist family and a Japanese-American girl, whose family had already been through so much, well, people stared, people whispered. My uncle said things at Thanksgiving I will not repeat. But there were Tuesday evenings. That was ours. Without ever planning it, without ever saying "let us do this," we had both started walking along the river path behind the old mill on Tuesday evenings, and we would meet there pretending it was just a coincidence and then walk together for an hour, sometimes two. We talked about everything, except the one thing we actually meant. She read more books than anyone I have ever known. She would tell me about them and I would just listen. I was not much of a reader back then, but I listened to every word she said. I think I was learning how to feel things by watching her feel them. The letter. I wrote it in September of 1964. I had been working at the mill for 2 years. I had saved up some money, and I had made a decision, a real decision, that I was going to ask her father if I could take her to a proper dinner. Not the river path, a real dinner, at a real restaurant. But first I wanted to write her a letter, because I knew if I tried to say it out loud, my voice would do something I could not control. So I wrote it down. I wrote that I thought about her every single morning before I even opened my eyes. I wrote that she was the only person I had ever met who made silence feel comfortable. I wrote, and I have read this line so many times I know it by heart. I wrote, "I do not know if this is something you could want, but I know that not asking is something I can no longer afford." I put the letter in an envelope. I put the envelope in my coat pocket, and then I waited for the right moment. The right moment never comes when you are afraid. I carried that letter for 6 whole weeks. 6 weeks of Tuesday evenings where I would reach into my coat pocket, feel the corner of that envelope, and think not today, maybe next week, when things feel more settled, as if you can ever know how things will feel next week, as if knowing what she would say would have made the fear go away. It would not have. The Tuesday, I cannot forget October 13th, 1964. I remember it was cold, colder than October usually felt. The leaves had fallen fast that year, and the path along the river was covered in them, all brown and wet. The whole world smelled like something ending. She was already on the path when I arrived. That was strange. She was always walking when I got there, always moving, but that day she was standing completely still, looking at the water. I walked up beside her, and she did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, "Thomas Haverford asked my father's permission to court me." Thomas Haverford. He worked at the bank. He was polite and steady, and came from a family that everyone liked. He was not a bad man. I think he was probably a kind man. I stood there. I felt the letter in my pocket, and I said nothing. She turned and looked at me, and I have spent 65 years trying to understand what was in that look. It was not mean. It was not happy. It was something more like a question. A question she was asking without any words, the way we had always talked to each other. And I said, "Well, he is a good man." That was it. That was the whole thing. She looked at the river for one more moment. Then she said, "I suppose he is." And she walked away. I stood there in the wet leaves, and I did not call after her. I did not reach into my pocket. I did not say, "Wait, please wait. I have something I need to give you." I just stood there until I could not hear her footsteps anymore. Then I walked home, sat at the kitchen table, did not cry because I was 24 and I was a Calloway, and we did not do that. I put the letter in my wallet because I could not burn it, and I never did burn it. It is still there right now in a small plastic sleeve because the paper finally got too old to fold anymore. My daughter thinks it is an old insurance paper. I have never told her otherwise. If you are watching this and you have something you have been holding on to, a conversation you have not started, something you have never said to someone, please stay with this story a little longer. And if someone just came to your mind, someone you have been quiet around for too long, drop their initials in the comments. Just the initials. You do not have to say anything else. I will read every single one. June married Thomas Haverford in the spring of 1965. I went to the wedding because in a small town, lives get tangled together whether you plan it or not. Her father still fixed my watches. I could not simply disappear. I sat in the third row and watched her walk down that aisle in a simple white dress that looked exactly like her. Nothing extra, nothing wasted, just honest and beautiful. She looked straight ahead. I left before the cake was cut. I met my wife Margaret 2 years later. And I want to say this carefully because Margaret deserves honesty more than anyone in my life. I loved her. Truly. We built something real together, 3 children, 41 years of marriage, a house that was always full of noise and food, and the kind of ordinary happiness that people do not appreciate until it is gone. She was funny in a way that surprised you every time. She was steady in ways I badly needed. When she died in 2008, I sat with her hand in mine and told her she was the best thing that had ever happened to me. I meant every word. But there is a but that I have never said out loud until right now. There was always a small part of me that never left that river path, that was still standing in wet October leaves, holding something I should have said. Margaret could feel that. I believe she could feel the shape of something I was keeping, even if she did not know what it was. Women always can. She never asked me about it. I think she decided somewhere along the way that it was a door she did not want to open. And I have wondered for years, I have wondered whether keeping that door shut was the kindest thing I ever did for her, or whether never truly closing it was the cruelest. I do not have an answer. I am just telling you, it is a question I lived with every day. Years move differently when you get old. The 1970s passed in the blur of raising children's school plays, little league games, the tiredness of being a young father who did not fully know himself yet. The 1980s were work and worry. The mill closed. Money was tight. There was always something pressing down. I did not think about June every single day. I want to be clear about that. There were long stretches, years, where she was just part of the past. A memory sitting quietly among other memories. But then something would happen. The smell of October leaves, a woman in a diner tucking her hair behind her ear, a certain kind of light on water on a cold afternoon, and she would be right there. Not hurting, exactly, just present. The way you always know where an old scar is, even when it stops hurting. I heard sometime in the 1980s that June and Thomas had moved to Oregon. Portland, I think. Her father told me the last time I brought in a watch. He was an old man by then, hands too shaky to hold the small tools anymore. He handed me back my watch one afternoon and said very quietly, with no extra words around it, "You were always her favorite Tuesday." Then he looked back down at the counter. I stood there not knowing what to say. I am still not sure what to say about it. I do not know who is watching this. Maybe only a few people. But if you have stayed this long, please subscribe to this channel. Not for me, but because it is full of stories from people my age who are finally saying the things they kept too long. And those stories need to find the people who need them. My youngest daughter, Carol, asked me once, she was around 30, going through a hard time in her own marriage. She asked me, "Dad, did you and Mom ever have a perfect moment, like a moment that felt exactly right?" And I told her about a night in the summer of 1971. The kids were in bed. It was late. Margaret and I carried 2 kitchen chairs out to the backyard and sat there in the dark. No television, no conversation, just the sound of crickets and the summer night. At some point, she reached over in the dark and took my hand. We sat like that for almost an hour. I told Carol that was one of the finest hours of my entire life. Carol cried. She said, "That is everything, Dad. That is just everything." I meant it. That hour was real. It was good. It was mine. I am not standing here at 89 telling you my life was a mistake. It was not. I built something real. I loved real people, and they loved me back. But I had been sitting in this chair for 3 days trying to finally finish what I started. Because the thing that haunts me is not that I lost June. I am not even sure I ever had her to lose. What haunts me is something smaller, something more personal. It is that I let my own fear talk me into thinking I was being smart, being careful, being patient, when really I was just scared, And there is an enormous difference between those two things. It took me until I was very old to understand that. When you are young, fear sounds wise. It says, wait. Not yet. Make sure first. Do not risk it. And you listen, because the words sound reasonable and the fear is very convincing. Then one day you look up and it is October and the leaves are all down and someone else already asked. I'm going to tell you something I have never told another living person. 4 years ago, I was 85 years old. I found June on one of those family history websites. Her daughter had made a family tree, and there she was. June Arata Haverford, still in Oregon. Thomas had died in 2019. She was a widow. Same as me. I wrote her a message. I sat there for 2 full hours writing it. I told her I still thought about the river path. I told her I hoped her life had been good and full. And I told her my hands were shaking. When I typed this part, I told her that I had written her a letter once, back in 1964, and that I never gave it to her, and that I just thought she deserved to know it had existed. I read that message over and over, and then I closed the window without sending it, because I was 85 years old, and I was still afraid, after everything, after all of it, after 61 years, the exact same fear, just wearing different clothes. If you have ever done that, written something and deleted it, picked up the phone and put it back down, started a sentence and swallowed it, you can tell me right here in the comments. I will read them. I have plenty of time and not a lot left to do with it. And if this story is hitting somewhere real, for you, share it with one person. Just one. You do not have to explain why. Just leave it where they might find it. I do not know if June is still alive. I think about looking her up again. Then I do not. At 89, I think some things have simply run their season. Here is what I have come to. After 3 days in this chair, I think I love June the way young people love things they have already decided are impossible before they have even tried. It felt safer that way. If I never reached for it, it could not be taken away. If I kept everything on the river path, kept it in the letter, kept it folded in my wallet, it stayed perfect. Like a photograph nobody had touched. But she was a real person. She was a real woman living a real life. And she deserved someone who could look at her and say, I am here. I mean this. I am not going anywhere. Thomas Haverford did that. Whatever else, he did that. And she built her life. She has children, grandchildren, her own October evening somewhere in Oregon. I hope she has been happy. I genuinely hope that. And I hope this is the selfish part, the part I am not proud of but will not hide. I hope she remembers the Tuesday evenings. I hope they meant something to her too. I will never know. I told you at the start that this is not meant to teach anything. I meant that, but I will say one simple thing as plainly as I can say it. Fear is very good at sounding like wisdom. It dresses up. It uses calm words. It says, be careful, be patient, be sure. And sometimes that is real wisdom. But sometimes, and you will know the difference if you are honest with yourself, sometimes it is just fear in a nice coat, sitting in your chest, keeping you from the river path. I cannot tell you what to do with that. I am not going to try. I am just telling you what I know it costs, because I have the receipt. It is folded in a plastic sleeve in my wallet. I still dream about the river path, not every night, but enough. In the dream, it is always autumn. The leaves are always down. She is always standing at the water's edge, and I always have the letter in my coat pocket. But in the dream, every single time, without fail, I give it to her. She reads it slowly. She tucks her hair behind her ear. She looks up at me, and then I wake up. Every time. Before she says a word, I used to think that was cruel. Now I think maybe it is a gift, because in the dream, it is still possible. It is still open, still alive. Some things you hold on to not because you are waiting for them, but because letting go of them completely would mean letting go of who you were when they mattered. And I am not ready to do that. Not yet. My name is Walter Emmett Calloway. I am 89 years old. I had a letter I never gave, and I just needed someone to know it existed. That is all. That is the whole of it. If this landed somewhere real for you, if some part of this felt familiar, share it with one person. Just one person. You do not have to say anything about why. And if you have your own Tuesday, your own moment, your own letter, your own thing, you never said leave it in the comments. Not the whole story. Just however much you want to say. Some things just need to be said out loud, even quietly, even late. I will be reading.